Hi, it's Bill the engineer here. Now a few years ago I did a video on the correct way to make splice joints in chassis rails of vehicles, and the purpose of the video was to demonstrate that some of the fancy joint profiles preferred by practitioners in the field, and I'm talking about the slant joints or the Z-cut joints. The purpose was to demonstrate that these have absolutely no engineering benefit whatsoever. Now the arguments used by the practitioners in the field run along the lines, well, you've got more weld metal and hence it's got to be stronger, which on the face of it has some merit. And the only way I knew to counteract this was to do a manual stress analysis to show that the joint profile actually has zero effect on the strength of the beam. But I do accept that the maths involved probably deterred many viewers. So today's video has absolutely no maths whatsoever. I'm going to approach it in two parts. Firstly, looking at the strength of the beam, and secondly, the fatigue performance. Now in my last video, I argued that the longitudinal chassis rails in typical 4x4 behave as longitudinal beams, and beams have particular behaviour. They resist applied loads by bending action, and bending action causes direct stresses along the axis of the beam. They have maximum value at the top and bottom of the beam and pass through zero in the middle of the section. Now there are secondary stress systems such as direct shear and torsional shear, but they don't govern. Now if you change the loading and the support conditions on the beam, you obviously change the magnitude of the bending moment, but the stress system basically remains the same. And I'll show here a couple of computer analyses performed by others for different support conditions, and you see where the points of maximum stress are. Now if you load the beam up until the point of maximum stress reaches the yield stress of the steel, you then get what's called plastic deformation. It means if you remove the load, although the beam will spring back, it won't go to its original position. And by any definition, this is point of failure. The chassis rail is deemed to have failed once it's got a permanent deformation in it. But the real point to note is that it doesn't matter what you do with the web in the middle of the section. You can have whatever joint profile you want, add as much weld metal as you want, but it's not going to change the load at which plastic deformation commences. It has no effect on the load bearing capacity of the section. Now before I pass on from talking about the static strength, I want to say a word about the strength of the weld itself. Now all structural design is based on the premise that you have competent welds which are at least as strong as the surrounding material. And if this isn't the case, if you've got a defective weld, this is of course a weak link and it will reduce the load carrying capacity of the member. However, the converse doesn't apply. If you put in an extra strong weld with plenty of weld reinforcement, it doesn't increase the load carrying capacity. If the welded joint is in a high stress area and the surrounding stresses reach the yield stress of the base metal, the yielding will occur not in the weld itself but right next door in the surrounding material. To use the chain analogy, if you put one extra strong link into a chain, it doesn't increase the failure load. So in summary, it doesn't matter what you do with the joint going down through the section. You can make the joint as long as you want, add as much weld metal as you want. It's not going to change the failure load in the beam. You may as well just do a straight cut, which is simplest to do and uses the least amount of weld metal, and it's what's always done in industry. And if you do feel the need to add extra reinforcement, don't put fish plates on the web, put cover plates on the top and bottom flanges in the area of greatest bending moment, and that will increase the strength of the beam section. I now want to consider dynamic loads and later on fatigue. Now one of the big criticisms of my earlier work was that I did a static analysis and people were saying, oh, but that's completely unrepresentative because all of the loads are dynamic. Not so fast, we've got to be more specific. Firstly, if we consider the case of the global response, And these are the dynamic loads caused by the vehicle moving up and down on its suspension. Now when you think about it, these loads aren't so different to the static loads. You've got the same support points for the chassis members at the suspension mountings, and the load distribution, well, that's merely given by the mass by the acceleration. So it's basically a variant of the static load case. And a perfectly acceptable way of doing strength design is to apply what's called a dynamic amplification factor, or DAF, to the static loads. And this is what I did in my earlier analysis. It is incidentally the way that the dynamic analysis of this large offshore structure above me would have been performed. Now for dynamically live structures, the local vibrations and stresses can be very important. But vehicle chassis actually aren't that live. The members themselves are too stiff, and they're connected to the bodywork above at the mounting point, and this both stiffens them up and applies damping. So I think we can discount the local vibrations. However, the one important exception to this are the dynamic loads which are fed in at the suspension mountings and the shock absorber mountings, where you get significant dynamic loads over a wide range of frequencies. Now for well-designed suspension mountings, they aren't going to break under static strength. However, after a period of time, with a lot of fatigue, it can be a very different matter. But we're now getting to the heart of the matter. And the fact is that for the great majority of mechanical and structural breakages, things don't fail because they get overloaded, but they fail through fatigue. And some experts put this figure as high as about 90%. And what I'll do is I'll outline the design process for fatigue to give you an appreciation of the subject. And you start off by doing a full dynamic analysis for the structure of interest, in this case the vehicle and its chassis, in order to be able to synthesize the stress history at all critical points of interest throughout the service life of the structure. And having done that, having got the stress history, we then try to estimate the fatigue life in terms of number of cycles. And this is done using what's called an SN curve. And this is exactly the process which would have been followed for this guy up here, the Magnus platform. I show here the widely used family of SN curves produced by DNV, and this gives the relationship between the stress range and the fatigue life in terms of number of cycles. And the way to use them, on the vertical scale, you go to the stress range which is of interest to you. You look along horizontally until you meet the appropriate SN curve. You then go down vertically and read off the fatigue life on the horizontal axis. And in this case I've taken a stress range of 50 newtons per millimetre squared and found a predicted fatigue life of 7 by 10 to the 5th cycles. But an important point to note is that the scales aren't linear, they're logarithmic, which means that they are highly compressed. So if, for example, we double the stress range to 100 newtons per millimetre squared, we actually find that the fatigue life is only 1/8. Now the selection of the appropriate SN curve depends on the structural detail and the type of loading, and there's a wide range to choose from. However, we are interested in splice welds in chassis members, so I'll be looking at the transverse butt welds. Now there are a number of different parameters to consider here, but the big dividing line is between the double-sided butt welds and the single-sided butt welds. Obviously, if you've got an open section, like for example a channel, you should be able to make a double-sided butt weld. And you would typically find that you'd be able to use something like curve D. Now if you've got a closed box section, you're probably only going to be able to make a single-sided butt weld. And this is a completely different category. And one will probably in fact have to use curve W3, which is the lowest of all. On the other hand, if you can apply high quality NDT and guarantee that it's defect free, you may be able to use curve F3. and there's a world of difference between the various curves, and you're going to get orders of magnitude difference in the predicted fatigue life. So I'll give you an actual live example, and this is the underside of a chassis rail on a Discovery 1 near the rear suspension mount. And although it's a bit difficult to see, there's a cover plate here which has been welded on. My guess is that there was some corrosion. And at the end here, there's a rather poorly performed fillet weld, and this has acted as a stress raiser, and a crack has formed somewhere around here. It's gone through thickness, and although it's a bit difficult to make it out, it's propagated out sideways and it's gone round the corner. Now, much easier to follow it. It's gone round the corner here. It's going up through the base metal of the web, and in fairly short order that will reach the top and you're going to have a complete failure. And this is very typical of the way that these chassis members fail in fatigue. So how should this repair have been performed? Well, firstly, it's never acceptable to slap a cover plate over rusty metal. You need to cut away the affected material first, then let in a plate and do a single-sided butt weld all the way around. And if the weld is good, by which I mean you get good penetration and no defects, it should perform perfectly satisfactorily. However, if there's any doubt about the butt welds, you can put a cover plate over the top to reinforce it. And there's plenty of experience of this with bridge girders, which are likewise fatigue sensitive structures. The cover plate needs to be seal welded all the way around so you can't get water behind, creating a corrosion problem. And at the end it needs to be faired in so you don't get a dramatic transition, and pay particular attention to grinding the toes of the fillet welds, because that's where fatigue crack initiation will occur. So, to summarise, firstly, failure by static overload. Well, very unlikely to happen, and if it does happen, it'll probably be because there's been some extreme load applied, or maybe gross loss of material through heavy corrosion. And if it does happen, yielding will initiate in the highly stressed areas, most likely in the top and bottom flanges of the chassis rails. And then fatigue. Now, if you are going to get a failure, far more likely to be through fatigue. And fatigue cracks will initiate in the areas which have the combination of the high stress ranges together with the poor fatigue details, the stress raisers, the poorly executed welds. But again, overwhelmingly likely to be in the highly stressed areas, the top and bottom flanges of the chassis rails. The cracks will initiate there and will then propagate through the cross section. The one exception to this is if you get a very poor fatigue detail, maybe a bracket or a mounting, which is feeding high fluctuating loads into an understrength part of the structure. But for both of these load conditions, there seems to be absolutely no engineering merit whatsoever in going with one of the fancy splice details. Just do what's always done in industry. Just go for the simplest, the cleanest, and the most economical splice detail, and that will perform as well as anything and will save you a lot of time and money.